Hey friends, Pastor Bill at Columbia Road Baptist Church. And there's so much anxiety and so much concern about everything that's going on. If you turn on the news, if you turn on the radio, if you open up social media, there is so much talk about the coronavirus, about what the numbers are now, about how many people have lost their lives to it, about whether or not we have tests, about whether or not the government has responded properly. And it just becomes this cycle where we're constantly checking back and there's more and more question and there's more and more fear. And I want to share something with you that God used to help me with my anxiety about things. And really it comes down to a scary thought that there is so very little that you and I can control. At the end of the day, we have control over very, very few things. And I think that some of the things we think we have control over, we actually have no control over. And so with that facing you, how do you have any peace? Well, in that moment when you realize you have no control, you're going to either remember God or you're going to forget God. If you remember God in that moment, when you realize, hey, I can't control this, you'll remember God can control this. And He is in control, and He is working all things together for good. And the worries that you and I have are in no way worrying or troubling to God. Which one of our problems, even this national or global pandemic, is that big to God? Does that worry Him? And the answer is no, it most certainly doesn't. And you may be thinking about your job, you may be thinking about finances, you may be thinking about your children and their schooling, you may be thinking about all sorts of things that you're worried about. You say, I cannot control these things. And when you realize that God is in control, you find peace in that moment. What's the flip side of it? Well, if we realize we have no control and we forget God, then we have to do it ourselves. And we worry, and we have anxiety, and we try and scheme and plan, and it never works out because we really don't have control. And when we leave God out of the equation, it brings us into a spiral of asking ourselves, well, what if this, and what if that, and what if this, and what if that? And pretty soon, that gets us to such a place of terror and panic that we can hardly function. But the Lord does not want us to live that way. In fact, He said, don't worry about the necessities of life. Don't worry about the things that you have need of. He already knows that we have need of Him. So today, when you've turned on your social media and you've read about another person who's gotten sick, or maybe you've heard about a family member, a preacher friend of mine's in the hospital right now, and he's contracted the coronavirus. And his congregation and his family, especially his children and wife, I'm sure they're very worried for him. I'm sure they're very worried for him. What do you do? What can I do for my friend who's in the hospital near our nation's capital? And the answer is there's nothing I can do. And so I'm powerless. But then I remember God, and He is not powerless. And He is more than able. He is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or even think. And so with that in mind, I want you today to respond in faith to the troubles that you see. It might be better for you to turn off the TV. It might be better for you to turn off your phone, your social media for a while, silence your notifications, to get in front of the Lord in prayer, to open your Bible, to sing songs about His greatness, to remind ourselves to live in faith. Because though you and I have very little control, we don't need to live in the middle of panic. You and I can live in faith, in victory, knowing that it's out of our hands. In fact, that's where I find relief. I'm reminded of, as a child, how when my parents would drive me to my grandmother's house 2 hours away, a little over 2 hours away, I was never worried one time about my father's driving. I was never worried one time about whether he was going to get into an accident, because I had full confidence in my father. And today, even today, there's very few people that I allow to drive me around places, but my father is one of those people. And I can fall asleep knowing that my father is at the wheel and he has things under control. When I'm sitting in the passenger seat, what can I do to affect the safety of our drive? And the answer is nothing. There's nothing I can do. And because I trust my father, I can rest. I can close my eyes, I can put my head back, and I can catch some sleep when we go on long trips together. And so I want you to do that. I want you to realize your Father has the wheel, and He is more than capable and more than willing to take care of us. May God bless you with comfort today.